Hello and welcome to the EverydayFI podcast. Today is round 2 with Christina, the retired full-time nomadic traveler that we spoke to last week. I recorded a second episode with her because we forgot to talk about two very important topics. The foreign earned income tax exclusion that allows you to not pay taxes on $120,000 of income earned overseas, and how to not become an illegal immigrant in the countries you're traveling to. So stay tuned for round 2 with Christina. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. And I am actually back with Christina, who we talked to last week about her nomadic full-time FEIE travel life. And if you enjoyed that episode, you'll really enjoy this one because there were some topics that I kind of missed out on talking to her about. And that's why I wanted to do a follow-up episode with her. And the main one was the tax exclusion that she uses to allow her to do this full-time traveling. I think she hinted at it in our last episode, but we never really dived into it. So she's going to give us a rundown of that. As just a general disclaimer, neither of us are tax professionals, so don't take this as tax advice. Please seek out your own tax professional. She's going to go over, what her own tax professional has told her. Just want to get that disclaimer out there. And then we also are going to talk about where she is now and some interesting rules around traveling in Europe and what it means to have like a US passport and where you can travel and for how long. And then we'll just talk about, whatever comes up. So yeah. Hey, Christina, what's up? Where are you right now? Let's start there.
I'm in the country of Albania in a town called Saranda. It's a beach town. And I look right across to Corfu, Greece. I took a ferry from Corfu to get over here to Albania. So
great. Yeah. And you've been there 2 days. We were talking offline before we hit record about the struggle of traveling there. And do you want to say, you feel free to say a little about that, because I think some people see, full-time traveling as super glamorous. And I think it's good for us to maybe talk a little bit about the unglamorous parts. And so, if you wouldn't mind resharing the story you told me for our listeners, because I think they would like to hear it.
Sure.
Just so that they know that, life can be sticky even when you're a full-time nomadic traveler and you're super glamorous.
Yeah. So I actually, a couple days ago, I had just finished a cruise. So that was glamorous, if you will. And I was getting off the cruise ship around 9 a.m. I had to actually meet in their theater, and I had arranged for a bus transfer through the cruise line to take me from the port to the airport. So the bus transfer itself was going to be about an hour and a half. No big deal. But I get to the meeting spot a little before 9, and the charter buses are late. So, we're sitting in there probably an additional 30, 45 minutes. So it's okay, one delay already. No big deal, because my flight really wasn't until the evening. It wasn't until 6 p.m. So I got to the airport probably by 11:30. So super early anyways. And I knew I was going to have to hang out there. And I tried to do the best I could with my time. There's a little museum. I sat and had a coffee. I ate lunch. I ate dinner. I walked around. Oh, I did do a little shopping. I bought myself a new wristband for my smartwatch. By chance, I have a Vietnamese smartwatch. And so I was surprised that they actually carried the right band and everything. So I bought myself that, so wasting a lot of time in the airport. And then guess what? Flight is delayed. So the flight left another hour. So I was just in the Athens airport for a terribly long time, and got over to Corfu, got to the ferry. Ferry was also an hour late. I had misread the ticket info. I was thinking it was a 1-hour ferry from Corfu to Saranda, Albania, and it was a 2-hour ferry ride, which is fine. It was lovely. It's an outdoor ferry, meaning open air. There was some camper vans that were being loaded, so that also took a long time. So we get over to Albania and they offload the people first, but we can't get our luggage because it's all behind the vehicles. So they have to pull out all the vehicles and then people can go in and get the luggage. So it's just one thing after another. And I'm staying relatively close to the port. It's only about a 15-minute walk. However, after traveling, 17 hours at that point in time, I'm tired. It's kind of a hilly community, and I just did not want to drag my suitcase. And, it's after midnight at that point. So I had asked a taxi, all the taxi guys are lined up and they're like, taxi, taxi. And I said, yes, please. And I showed the guy where I wanted to go on my phone. I had all that ready, and he scoffed me off because it's not far enough for him. It was too low of a fare. I get it. Okay, fine. I walked to the second guy. He did the same thing. I'm walking up a big hill, by the way, too. And finally, at the third guy on top of the hill, I just kind of begged and pleaded. And I offered, I knew how much it was going to cost. It was supposed to be 10 to 15 euros. And he was going to blow me off as well. And I said, look, I'll give you 20 euros. Will you please just take me to this place? I've never been here. I didn't know what it was going to be like walking there. Now that I've got here, last night I was walking around later at night, perfectly fine, but I wasn't lugging my suitcase and a backpack and, this and that. So yeah, it was not a glamorous day. I was exhausted, and I got to my apartment, and there's air conditioning in the living room, but not in the bedroom. So that just kind of added to my not so wonderful day. But it's a beautiful place. I'm happy to be here, and I have slept a lot. So that's good.
Yeah, time to move the bed to the living room.
Yeah.
Or at least the mattress. I feel like I'm one of those weirdos who actually really likes spending time in airports. And I am not a full-time traveler, obviously, but I spent a lot of time as a kid traveling. So every time I was in an airport, it signified that we were going somewhere fun. Usually it was always for a vacation or holiday or whatever. And so even when we spent a lot of time in the airport, like it was a precursor to the fun. And so now I have that association. So I guess I'm one of those weirdos who's like, yay, airport. And then when they're like, it's a delay, I'm like, that's fine. I'll go hang out.
While I was waiting, I was kind of excited to hang out there for a while. I did look up options to sit in a lounge. I think there were two I could have bought into because my flight was a 1-hour flight. It's just economy, a cheap flight. But I decided against that because the reviews on the lounges just weren't anything spectacular, and they weren't that big. The Athens airport is not that huge, and they separate it by terminals. So you can only get into the portion related, like I was doing a domestic flight. So the international terminal probably was bigger and more than likely had other things to occupy your time. I was sitting there thinking, I wish I was in Singapore because they have like the best airport ever and all this stuff to do. So yeah, Athens domestic terminal B is not that exciting. There was one nail salon, and I was going to try and get a pedicure, but they did have a wait time, and I thought I was going to cut it too short before my flight, so I declined it, but then my flight was delayed anyway. So, but I wouldn't have gotten a pedicure at the airport because of that. So, yeah.
It's, I'm weird that I kind of like these, travel stories that are, I don't know if anybody knows what type 2 fun is. And if we talked about this in our last episode, I am going to repeat myself, but it's where there's type 1, 2, and 3 fun. It's an outdoorsy person's kind of thing. I think REI has it on their website, but type 1 fun is when you're having fun in the moment, and it's, the moment is fun to remember, but not that memorable because nothing big happened. And type 2 fun is when you're not having fun in the moment, but then it's fun to remember. And those are usually the really best stories. And then type 3 fun, which is not fun, is not having fun in the moment and not fun to remember. So if somebody gets injured or sick or something. But the type 2 fun is usually where the gold is because that's where the best stories come out of. And just a quick sidebar, I went to Scotland with my partner last May, and we flew out of Raleigh, Durham, and connected in JFK, and then we're going to go fly over to Edinburgh. And JFK is one of the worst airports ever. Like there's always delays and cancellations. So our flight didn't get delayed. It got canceled. And it got canceled before we even headed to the airport. I think it was like in like 30 minutes before we headed there. And I had actually never had a flight canceled on me before. So I didn't know what to do. Like, I was like, do I need to reschedule? I didn't know if I was supposed to or they were going to do it. And they did reschedule for me, but it was like, your flight is going to leave in 2 days and it's going to be 3 connections. And I was like,
exactly.
Screw that. Actually, let's not put the F word in there. Screw that. I was like, okay, I'm just going to rebook with a different airline. And so I rebooked like our first flight to JFK with a different airline, and then was just going to keep the second flight. But the problem with that I didn't realize, and this is a learning moment for me and anybody else out there, is that if you have a different airline, it's probably in a different terminal if you're at a larger airport. And so we had to actually leave our terminal, go back through security to get to this other gate. We missed the second flight.
Oh,
so we
no.
had to, because I didn't know. I was like, oh. And so we spent the night in JFK, and like, we just didn't sleep because there was no way to sleep. We were on hard ground, hard floor. Like, we weren't even past security. They wouldn't even let us through security. Like, we had to go and like wait in a line to get ticket. It was terrible. Anyway, so we literally arrived there at the same time that the rebooked flight would have gotten us there.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, we could have stayed at home and like just chilled instead of staying at the airport. But we were just laughing about it the whole time. Like, it was just, to us, it was just funny. And then, so it was almost like 48 hours of traveling straight, because we got to Edinburgh and then we had to take a train and we actually had to fly through London and then take a train to Edinburgh, because we couldn't even find any flights to Edinburgh anymore. So we had to go to London. And then the car we were supposed to rent was gone because it was like 2 days later. And so we had to drive a Tesla. And Teslas, so you say nice. The Teslas in Scotland are not nice.
Oh.
Because the roads are really, really, really narrow, because they're all sheep paths, and Teslas are really, really wide. They're like 6 feet wide. I know you wouldn't think so, but they're like really wide cars. And we basically just completely missed our first 2 days there. And we stayed like one night in the first Airbnb when we had planned on staying 2 nights. And it was up near like Loch Ness. But we tell that story because we're like, it was not fun in the moment, but now it's funny to remember, because it was like, oh, I could have just, kept with the flight that they gave me, and then, whatever, and then maybe chosen not a Tesla.
Right.
So, yeah, it was fun. So anyway, let's talk about this tax exclusion. I'm sure everybody's like, please stop talking and let's talk about the tax exclusion so I can learn how to travel full time. So give us the rundown of like what this is, what it means, like how we can do it. And I'll ask you some follow-up questions.
Sure. So anyone can go to the IRS website, irs.gov, and they can type in this acronym, FEIE, and it stands for Foreign Earned Income Exclusion. And the title of it is a little misconstrued, I believe. There's a handful of different ways to qualify. It does say foreign earned income. Well, I'm a U.S. citizen, but I earn all of my money from U.S. clients. Essentially, I'm self-employed. I'm retired now, but I had this consulting business, so I personally sought out U.S. clients. So I'm getting paid in U.S. money from U.S. people. I have an EIN number, but sometimes I still consult under my Social Security number. So that consulting is also self-employment income as well, which is important. But the main gist is that there's a couple different ways to qualify for it. I qualify on what's called the physical presence test. If I stay out of the United States or its territories, we have 7 territories, for 330 days or more, I do not have to pay income tax on the first 120,000 of my income. So that was a huge, huge thing for me. At the time when I left the US in 2019, I was earning more than that. So just for like simple math, if say I made 150,000, you subtract 120 and your tax liability then is $30,000, which drops you down into the lower tax bracket, which is great. And that's how you can save so much. So that 120,000 that is exempt or excluded, you can save and invest. And so that's essentially what I did. I shoved it all into my brokerage account and VTI and chill. So essentially a little bit more than that. So yeah, so for me, I choose to stay out of the US. Technically, you can come back in for 35 days or less. I save that time for my immediate family and closest friends. If anything would happen, I would come back and help out or do anything I would needed to do. But otherwise, I'm on the other side of the world and I just don't like zigzagging back and forth. So I haven't been back to the US since 2021. I did go back very briefly early 2020 before all the fun pandemic stuff happened. And then I swung through in 21 for a little bit as well to help out with some family stuff. But otherwise, I've been on the other side of the world. The good thing for me at the time, 2020, my business exploded. So I made a lot more money. So that year, like we kind of said at the beginning, I have a tax specialist who files my taxes on my behalf. He specializes in taxes for expats and nomads, so people that live outside the US. And when we were filing my taxes for that year, he essentially said, I saved over $20,000 by taking this tax exclusion. So that got me really excited to think about how much I'm not giving the government. So this is not a loophole or anything like that. It is clearly something our government provides us. And there are, if you go to the website, you can read the other ways to qualify. I can't speak to those because I qualify by this physical presence test. And the other thing that I learned, so I personally call myself retired. I kind of shut down my business, or I just don't take on clients anymore unless something occasionally comes up and I'd be happy to help out. And so I'm not earning much income. I have some side passive income from books I've written in the past. My Facebook page is monetized. I get money from supporters who send me money on Buy Me a Coffee and some other sites like that. And but it's lower income. And anyways, I had asked my tax specialist, now that I'm not really working my business, do I need to follow this exclusion? Should I stay in it? Can I go back to the US more than 35 days? Like what should I do? And he informed me last year that it's not a program you can hop in and out of. If I choose to not qualify, which means, like I go back to the US longer, in my case, I would not be able to apply for this exclusion again for 5 years. I would have to wait 5 years and then actually qualify for it as well. So I did not know that back in 2019, and which I didn't really need to know that then, but I asked about it just because I'm not a high earner anymore. I've essentially kind of cut out my income stream. And I do know, as I was reading through the IRS website a little bit further, there's earned income and unearned income. So there's a lot of expats and nomads or just traditional people that own rental properties. And income from rent is considered unearned income by the IRS. It's under that category. So that income would not qualify for this. And I just bring that up in case, like, oh, you're thinking about, possibly trying out nomad life or moving abroad or something like that. And if you wanted to reduce your tax liability on that, this would not help you to do that. So, my income was 1099 essentially, but if you were a full employee working for a company in the US or out of the US, you could qualify with salaried income too. So yeah, it's a great opportunity. that our government gives us. So I'm really glad I learned about it. And I learned about it from the digital nomad groups I had joined prior to me leaving the US. And I was just doing my research. What are all the different things I need to know before I sell everything and I start traveling the world full time? And this came up, and it was, people were talking about it, but it was very, very brief. So I went to the IRS website and started looking it up and reading what I could. And then by chance, I have a cousin who left the US. They used to live in the Houston, Texas area, and they moved to Ecuador. And they had done that a couple years before I had left. So I had messaged her and my cousin, and she was able to connect me with her tax specialist, which is, I actually got to meet in person when I went to go to Ecuador to see my family anyways, because he lived in the area. He's a US citizen too, but he had retired down there and still did taxes on the side. And so I got to meet with him in person. He explained everything to me, and he's been really great. I could email or text him at any time. And half the time I'm kind of asking the same question over again because it just didn't soak into my brain yet. But yeah, so it's 2024 now, and I've been filing the tax exclusion since my 2020 taxes. So
yeah, that sounds like a great thing for people who would want to travel full time, but also keep earning income. I'm guessing it's not for people who have travel aspirations that are less than a year. Is that what you would say? If you wanted to do this, you should probably be somebody who's traveling more than a year consecutively, because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Well, I think the biggest thing is this. If you earn more than 120,000, because that just gets lopped off, it's going to help you if you earn over or under that. Because if you earn, say, 100, then all of your income is excluded, which is super great. But if you earn over, then it drops you down. So the way that I see it is that if you're a really high earner and you can take your job digitally and remote and you do want to travel, you either need to commit to the program or not. If you did want to claim it for 1 year, I think, according to everything that I know, that would be possible. And sure, the savings could be great for that 1 year. I just don't know, what would be the hiccup then? You have to wait 5 years before qualifying again. Would it be worth getting out of the program or not? So yeah, I do feel like once you're in it, you need to commit to it moving forward. I don't know how things will change for me. I'm turning 45 at the end of July. So, our retirement accounts and such doesn't really, we can't really technically touch them to 59 and a half, 60, whatever. So I don't know what would happen financially, income wise for me in these next 15 years. So although I'm choosing to not work and not make the big income, I don't know with my little side gigs if they ever take off. So I am coming at this with the intention of okay, maybe my little side gigs will take off and I'll just make a lot of money. So staying in the program would still be beneficial. Because my other question to my tax guy was if I just earned under the standard deduction, would that also, be a good tax strategy? But I can't control how much my Facebook page earns. It when people interact on it, I just earn money, and Facebook makes these funny little algorithms on how much I make. If it's 10 cents or $10, I have no control over that. So in things like that and these other income sources that I have out there, I can't limit the income. It's not like I go and contract and say, I'm only going to earn $10,000 from editing a textbook, So I have already written off that idea, but I did ask my tax guy about it. And he said for me not to worry about earning under the standard deduction.
Well, and it's one of those things where it's you don't want the tax tail to wag the dog, right?
Right.
More money is better, whether you pay higher taxes or not. It's still more money in your pocket at the end of the day. So more money for travel and, fun dive expeditions. Cause I know that's what you like to do, right? Is go in warm water. Snorkeling. Thank you. Snorkeling
yes.
Expeditions, not diving.
Yeah. I like to stay on top of the water and watch everyone below.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And it's funny because I'm thinking, like, what is earned income? Like, what's considered income? And I doubt either of us could answer that because we're not tax professionals. But I'm thinking of like somebody who's fully retired, not earning any income whatsoever, and is like potentially pulling from their retirement accounts.
Right.
What
So
is that?
I did look up some of that because I was interested myself. So earned income is your full-time, I always get it confused. Is it W-2 or W-4? It's been so long. When you're
It's
full
W-2.
W-2, okay. And W-4 is like contract work, right?
So it's 1099 is contract work.
Yeah.
W-4 is the form you fill out for your W-2 job. So
Oh, okay, okay.
my mom's an accountant, so I had to learn all of
There we go. Yeah.
Yes.
So that kind of stuff, when you're like physically offering services for income, stuff like that. So your W-2 or your 1099, those are earned income sources. I'm sure there's more, but that just stuck in my brain because that was the type of like money I was earning. Now, our interest and dividends on our investment accounts, that is in the unearned category. Same with rental income. And if you get gifted money, generational wealth, passing that down, gifted funds is unearned income. So, yeah, so those were some of the categories for that. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's nice to know that this exclusion exists. A lot of my nomadic friends had no clue about it. So I connected them with my tax professional, but I know he's been pretty busy. There's a lot of others. If you just Google tax specialist for expatriates or expats, you will find people. You might want to add in United States or US into that because it's obviously relevant to us. And you'll find other people, and almost all of these people will give you a free consult. But yeah, a lot of my nomadic friends or expat friends, they had no clue about it. And we were just talking, and somehow, these random topics come up. And so they were able to go back and refile their taxes from past years. And I mean, they're saving tens of thousands of dollars, and then they're sticking it in the market and invest. So I'm really happy. That's why it's great to speak with you about this. The more we can get it out there is important because a lot of people can benefit. There's a lot more people that are out there traveling or just moving abroad for one reason or another. And as a US citizen, no matter what, you have to file your taxes every year. I have a couple friends, US friends, that they left. And one buddy in particular, he was telling me he did Peace Corps for like 7 years. And he's like, I didn't file my taxes. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, no. Like, you have to file. Whether you owe or not is a totally different thing. But unfortunately, as a US citizen, it doesn't matter if you're an astronaut on the moon or in a submarine with the Navy, you still have to file. And there are obviously instances where that is not the case, but the majority of it is you file. Whether you owe or not is totally separate. So yeah, knowledge is power. Go file your taxes.
Yeah. When I was a lot younger, around 19, I definitely had some people in my life who thought they were the conspiracy theory types. And so they were like, oh, I'm not going to file my taxes because then the government can track me down. I was like, I don't think that's how that works, but okay. Yeah. Yeah. Always file your taxes. It's required. I would be curious how astronauts do that though. You're right. Like, I guess they just like call down and be like, hey, tax person, do it for me.
Well, they have exceptions for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it just,
I feel like that's a great exclusion, like, or exception.
yeah.
I was on the moon.
I totally understand where my friend was coming from. He had left, he had been gone for 7 years, and he's just like, well, I'm not there, so I don't owe. And I get that mindset, but it's just false. Well, the owing part could not, that might be true. But yeah, it's just he didn't realize that you still have to file, So yeah.
I mean, it's not something that is, it being the IRS and the tax system is not simple. It's not intuitive. It's not easy. And so I completely understand why he would think, oh, logically speaking, I'm not there. But the IRS doesn't work with logic. It's not logical. It's quite illogical, actually. If you've ever tried
Exactly.
to read some of their articles and match it to a worksheet, you're like, what? And side note, my last tax filing, I tried it by myself. It was when I had technically 3 businesses, sort of. I had rental income, I had the income from my Alate money, which is now EverydayFI. And then I had like side hustle income, so like TaskRabbit type of things. So those were all like 3 separate things. And the way that the tax forms were laid out is they don't tell you that you can't write off something more than once. Like they just tell you, here's the slot to put your, mortgage interest. And so I did it for each one. And my refund was like $13,000. And I was like, something's wrong. Something is very wrong here. And thank God my mother is an accountant and a CFO. And by the way, audience, she might be a guest star on this show at some point. But anyway, so I had her look at it and she was like, Megan, you can't write off your mortgage interest 3 separate times. I was like, oh, okay. And when she said it that way, I was like, oh, well, duh. But it's not like the way that the forms are set up is not intuitive, because I was like, okay, it's telling me I could do this. I figured it would say I couldn't because I already did, but it's not. So maybe I can.
Yeah, that's why it's always great to, and that's why I use, my tax specialist. I pay, somewhere between 250 and 300, maybe 350 for his services. Now, I also have I think it's 350. Mine is a little bit more complicated. I did have contractors working for me before, so I had him fill out the forms for them, and I have lots of different accounts and this and that. Whereas I know some of my friends that have gone to him, they have much simpler taxes, so they pay less. I still feel like his fee is way cheaper than if anyone else in the US. Again, he was in Ecuador at the time, and it's a lower cost of living country. I do know he's back in the US now. He had to help out some family. But yeah, you can find great people out there. I'd rather pay and have that peace of mind, because if anything gets messed up, obviously, yes, I would be the person at fault, but I have a layer of protection is the way that I feel it. I have him as the professional filing on my behalf under his, credentials, and that makes me sleep well. So yeah, it works out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. I feel like sometimes some of us are DIYers to our own detriment.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how I've been. Like, I DIY'd my taxes and I messed them up. I was just lucky that my mother is an accountant. But I also was DIYing this podcast for way too long. And I finally found somebody to edit for me. And now I'm just like, oh my God, this feels so much better. So I feel like this is a little bit of a different theme, but just hiring a professional to do the work and take it off your hands so that you can think about and do other things, especially when that professional could probably do the same thing for way less time than you. Like, if you tried to figure out your own taxes, you could probably do it, but it would probably take you like a month, whereas he could take like an afternoon to do it, Like,
I used to use TurboTax back in the day, probably in my 20s, when it was a lot more simple. I didn't have all these other accounts and stuff going on. I had quite a few little side jobs, but filling in, those forms like wasn't bad. But I'll admit to this one, I did mess up pretty big. When I finished my PhD in 2009, I did that, turned 30, moved from Kansas to Texas, started a full-time assistant professor position in math, in a math department, and filling out that W-4 form that we were talking about. I must have misread a line, and apparently no taxes were being taken out. Now, I moved to Texas. Kansas had state income tax. Texas did not have state income tax. When I was in Kansas, I was a full-time doctoral student and I only had part-time jobs. So I didn't have any like big salary. When I went to Texas, I had a healthy salary. So when I was getting my physical paycheck, which was direct deposit, so I'm not even getting like a paper slip anymore. Like, I'm sure I could have downloaded something. I wasn't reading stuff. I literally just didn't pay attention. that none of my, like the other taxes, the federal taxes were not being taken out. And then I go to do my taxes, after that year. And I think I owed like $11,000 and I freaked out because, I'm 30, 31 at that time. And thankfully I did have that money because I had saved some, not tons, but I did have, I probably had like $40,000 in a savings account somewhere, not invested, probably a regular savings account at that time. Yeah. So I still called my parents freaking out. I was like, oh my God, how did I do this? Like, I'm such an idiot, a PhD idiot, because I messed up the form somehow. And it was frustrating because I was like, well, why didn't anyone with HR like question this? But they don't, because they just assume you want to, file in a particular way. So yeah, that was probably one of my biggest oopsies. And thank goodness that I was decent enough with money then that I could just pay it. It was painful because I'd never had such a large chunk I had to do minus the student loans. But yeah, so that was an oopsie. So
Yeah, even if your taxes are simple, like if there's one small thing that you do wrong, there was a woman at a job that I had that she said every year she would owe around $6,000. She was a single woman. She had one job. It was W-2. And she was like, I don't understand why this money keeps coming out. And it was because she had selected that she was head of household rather than just single.
Yeah.
And that was one thing. And she didn't know the difference. Like, she was like, what's the difference between, like, I am my head of household. It's just me though. Like, and so I think that's why she was owing all this money. I don't know the particulars, but I was like, that's just one tiny mistake. And it totally screwed her for several years. I think she was able to like refile and get some of that money back. But I was like, woof, man, $6,000 every time. Woof, no.
Yeah. Well, and so one thing I should add with this tax exclusion, I briefly mentioned it. I said I do have to pay self-employment tax. So because of how I choose to run my business, I did not want an S corp for a long list of reasons and this and that. So I'm just contracting under my EIN and my social security number, depending on the circumstance. And so self-employment tax is right around 16%. However, the past several years, I had been getting money back from the government. And so I wanted it to be zero. I'm trying to get as close to zero, because if I'm getting money back from the government, it means I'm giving them too much. I don't want to give them my money. I want my money to work for me on my time and terms. So this past tax year, I had decreased the amount of self-employment tax I was paying in. I pay it quarterly. I go to the website, pay it quarterly. And I underpaid purposefully because I was trying to balance it out to zero. Well, I had underpaid too much. And so then I owed, it was less than $1,000, 920 or something. So that was still kind of like a kick to the gut, but it wasn't that 11,000 that I hit from before. So it wasn't any big deal. Fine. I paid that. And so this year, again, I've had one full year of like me calling myself retired, not government calling myself retired because of age, right? And so I'm trying to balance that out a bit. Now my income is even less than it was last year so far. Who knows what the rest of the year will hold. But yeah, so I'm kind of playing the numbers game on that. I really do want to try and get it as close to zero as possible. And I'm okay with paying some at the end. I'd rather personally pay in April or March whenever I file than get money back, just because I want to keep my money when I have it.
Yeah, I agree. I try to get close to zero if I can. I've had several crazy years though, where it's like one year I had 4 jobs and like W-2 jobs, not just side hustles and stuff. And of course I add in all the side hustles. So I have no idea what my taxes are going to be this year or that or whatever. But yeah, it's that I agree with you. I don't want to give the government a free loan is what I call it, because you're not getting any interest on it or anything. And people love getting tax refunds because they're like, oh, it's, a nice bonus that I get. And I'm like, I don't know. I'd rather have it personally, but I get it. Like if people, are challenged with saving, then this is a great like forced savings that they have to do. So yeah. Okay, so one thing we were talking about before we hit record was where you are in Albania and how that works with having a US passport. And you're in a certain zone that I'm not going to say out loud because I can't pronounce it. I'll let you pronounce it. So I guess what I wanted to talk about a little bit as a theme is, how do you travel full time? And I guess we might have touched on this a little bit in our last episode, but I want to dive in a little bit more about like, how do you not get like deported back to the United States? What do you have to do to make sure that you're not in a country like too long, or that you're, following some sort of guidelines so that you're not, like I said, getting deported back to the United States. And then this tax exclusion would probably not work anymore because you probably have to stay in the United States for a certain amount of time. Can you talk through all of that? That was a lot, I know, but
Sure. Yeah. So the key is that you do not want to be an illegal immigrant in any country. In the US, we talk about everyone coming up from Mexico. Well, as a traveler, you could potentially be that type of a person, if you will. So you want to enter countries legally. Every country has a different length of time you can stay based on your passport. So as a US citizen, I can only reference US passport holders. For example, I mentioned Mexico. That was the first country I went to. At the time that I went in 2019, any US citizen that entered, they were given a stamp in their passport, and it literally said 180 days from that entry. They have changed that since. These rules change all the time, but at that time, any US person, they get this stamp. So whether you stayed 1 week or 6 months, like, you were good for those 180 days. Out here in Europe, it's a little funny. So there's like 46 countries. I don't know the exact number. There's 40 some countries in the continent of Europe. And the majority of them are in a zone called the Schengen zone. And then the smaller portion is out of the zone. So you're either in the zone or you're out of the zone. So some of my favorite countries that are in the zone are Greece, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal. That's just a handful off the top of my head that are in the zone. There's a lot more. Albania is out of the zone. So is Cyprus. That's another one I'm kind of eyeballing. Croatia used to be out of the zone, and then last year they went into the zone. But what's important to know about this Schengen zone is that with a US passport, you can enter and you don't have to apply for anything in advance. You can just show up, kind of like we do in Mexico, but you have a 90-day ticker that starts. When you show up in the zone, you only get 90 days out of 180 days. But that 180 days is a rolling calendar. So there's not a hard reset, meaning that I entered Greece on May 3rd. And so it's always 180 days, like moving from that point that I can only have 90 days in this window. It's very confusing. So
yeah, I'm actually like, I'm not following. So
here's the thing. So I entered May 3rd, and I think if I physically count 90 days on the calendar, I believe it was July 31st would have been my 90th day. If I would have done all my 90 days within the zone, so like Greece and Spain and stuff like that, then I needed to leave by that last day, and I cannot go back to any of those countries for at least 90 more days. So this calendar just keeps on moving. So I personally left the zone on July 22nd. I gave myself like a 9-10 day window on purpose. I think I can re-enter around October 21st, 22nd, something like that, or just round up November 1st, and then I'm fine. Yeah. If you try and re-enter, they scan your passport, you're going to get flagged. They're going to know you've been in the zone for too long, and then you're going to be taken off to the side and into a room, and then they're going to interrogate you. So I actually ran into a little issue coming over here to Albania. I entered Athens, Greece by plane on May 3rd. did everything you're supposed to do. You go to the immigration counter and they take your passport and they look at you and they look at the passport and then they thumb through and stamp it. They everywhere seems to scan it these days. So like, but I can see the face of the immigration officer, but their like desk is pretty hidden from you. So I can't really see everything they're doing. Anyway, so he gives me my passport back and I leave and I catch a train and then a ferry off to an island. Another one of those days. And I was thumbing through my passport. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. There's not a stamp into Greece. And I'm like, well, I know they scan stuff and maybe it's just all electronic now. And almost 3 full months have passed and I forgot about it. Well, I'm in Corfu, Greece, and I'm at immigration to get on this ferry to go to Albania. And it's 2 ununiformed guys in like polo shirts, because this is a small little port. So like the tiniest immigration office, if you even call it that. And I get this older guy, there's a younger guy next to him, the other officer, and he's thumbing through and he's like, he asked me, where do you live? I go, and I'm not going into the whole nomad thing with him. I know to say, I live in the United States. I live in Arizona. I actually said that first. I live in Arizona in the United States. And he's like, you don't live in Europe? I go, no, I do not live in Europe. And he's thumbing through my passport. And then he turns to the other guy and then they're talking in Greek. And then the younger guy asks me, where do you live? I'm like, still live in Arizona, Arizona, United States. And so I figured out, the older guy then said, where's your stamp? I told him, I go, I came here to Greece on May 3rd. And he's like, there's no entry stamp. And I go, well, there's the computer scanning thing in the Athens airport. And so I don't know, they're talking back and forth. He did end up stamping me out. But that was the first time I've had any like multiple questions over and over again, really. And it's all because I thought I saw the officer in Athens in May stamp. Like I thought he made the motion, but again, they're behind a big desk, so you don't see everything. Maybe his stamp ran out of ink. I don't know. I do remember leaving Split, Croatia 2 years ago, and immigration leaving that airport was just a scan. Like you walk up to a kiosk, you put your passport down, you look at a camera and it scans your passport and your face and it opens up these little gates and you go. And the same thing with like Singapore. So I just kind of assumed what the guy was doing in Athens like was similar, but apparently not. But yeah, so ultimately like Europe is hard because you get 90 days in the zone, 90 days out of the zone. And I want to go see friends in other countries, but if they're in the zone, I can't go there until I have the time to do it. When I was here in 2022, I did not do 90 days straight. I did like a month and a half in the zone. And then like I left for a month and then I came back in for a month. So like you can spread out your time, but you still have to keep track of like, have out of 180 days with this moving calendar, you cannot exceed 90. They make it really confusing, and I don't know why. Thailand, for example, I ended up spending 8 months total there, but I did 6 months straight, and then I moved along and came back twice. But Thailand, when I first entered December of 22, they gave me a 45-day visitor tourist stamp permit, if you will, that's free on entry. And then the next week, I walked into a local immigration office. I paid them some money and I got a 30-day extension. So what was nice is that I could do it at the beginning of my stay. So I had 75 days right there. And then on my last day, my 75th day, I took a train to Malaysia. I spent one night there and then turned around and took the train back to Thailand just because of some nuance I didn't want to run into. But that is what we call a reset. When you do a border hop, they might say, border run. Let's go do a border run. All that means is that like, it's not a moving calendar. You can go on your last day, leave, come back. Some borders, whether it be land or air or sea, sometimes the officers want you to be gone for a day. That's why, like, I had slept overnight in Malaysia one time. But when I did a second border run, I used a visa agent. This is hilarious. It's truly a money grab. So these visa agents are in with the government, and you pay the money to have them drive you to the border to do this border run to get a new visa, a new stamp in your passport. And so they put a bright sticker on you. And this was a land border, and I was on foot. So they drove me, and then there's these little offices. You stamp out of Thailand. You walk, I don't know, 100 yards. You stamp into Malaysia. You step 1 foot over to the next officer, who giggles and says, "How was your time here?" It was 2 seconds. They stamp you out of Malaysia. You walk the 100 yards back, and you stamp back into Thailand, and you're done. And they're laughing because they see your bright sticker that says visa agent, tourist, something. It's just so obvious that it's a visa reset.
You're gaming the system. Yes.
They're all smiling because they all get a payout. They know I'm paying. So what happens with the driver? So the driver took us and told us, what to do. And then afterwards, we also got lunch because it was like a really far drive. But so he told us what to do and where to meet him for lunch and everything. And so I was trying to see where he was going, because we did not pay him until we got to the border. And before he opened the van door for us to get out, he collected the cash right then and there. And that's how I knew all that money was being exchanged right there at the border. So I was trying to watch to see where he was going, like, who is he going to pay? How is he going to pay it? But I couldn't watch that part. But obviously he and my driver was not the visa agent who set it up. So I know they get a cut. And then I'm assuming the immigration officers that are working the day of, anyone that has these stickers, they get a cut of it too. So yeah, that's a different way of doing it.
Yeah. And this is all legal to do this?
No. But it's standard practice, it's standard practice. But that's the thing, like, all governments, I mean, I'm sure these visa agents are also paying the government somehow besides just the immigration officers that are stamping our passports. It's all a money grab. One of my friends in Thailand, he didn't want to pay the fee. He had a scooter, but I mean, gosh, the border was like well over 5 hours away by car. But he rode a little scooter in the rain to do the border run himself. Now he has a German passport, and they were really trying to give him heck because they're used to people using the visa agent service at that land border specifically. So they're used to the income. It's their income to support their family, so it's just another job, honestly. And but he pushed back because the officers were trying to get him to pay them directly, and he really pushed, and he was able to get everything handled without paying the bribe, and but yeah, he was aggressive towards them too. So it's weird. Even when I was in Belize is a funny country. You can enter and you get 30 days upon entry when you fly into Belize International Airport, which is a tiny little airport. Then if you want to extend, you have to go to an immigration office. There's not many. I had to take a little boat and then a taxi to get to this immigration that was closest to where I was living. You pay a fee, you fill out a form. And at that time, they wanted a copy of your bank statement, and they wanted a copy of like your lease of like, or where you were staying. They wanted proof that you had a place to stay, and they wanted proof that you could afford to be there and not become a financial burden on the country. So, okay, fine. And then they give you a 30-day stamp. They now have changed it to where you can pay for a 90-day stamp, so you do not have to go back every month. What's different between Belize and Thailand, you can get the extension immediately after you get there. they adjust the date in their little stamp to make it work for you. In Belize, they don't do it. It's handwritten in your passport. They put this big old sticker. It takes half a page up, and they handwrite stuff on it. And you have to go in on your 30th day, or if you go in early, you're losing out on it. So they're counting it from when you were physically there. And they're not open on Sundays. And they get really mad at you if you go a day late, but they'll still they just yell at you. So it's a matter of like, do you want to be yelled at or not? Do you want to get the extra day or not? But even if you do go in a day late, I think they will handwrite, they'll back it anyway. So like, you're really not going to get an extra date. I don't know. It's just, they do it differently. Hopefully, at some point in time, I don't know, maybe a decade more, they'll get a little bit more high tech, but they're asking for the bank statement. I haven't had to do that in other countries. I've read that it's a possibility. My problem is that I do not keep a lot of money in any of my checking accounts that I use to pay my bills. I move money over from other accounts right before I'm going to pay my bills. I don't automate anything because I don't have that many bills anymore living like this. I can control my credit card well. So I had to pull a statement from I think I'm using one of my IRAs. I have one IRA, and where is that one at? I think, oh no, it's an old employer 401k sitting over at Fidelity. And the reason why I pull it from that account is because I can customize the date range, because they were really picky on that. You know how like a bank statement, it's like whatever dates you opened it, it's set. But if I go to immigration and my date for when I need my new stamp doesn't align with my bank dates, they would get mad about that and kind of not want to accept it. So I saw in Fidelity, I could force the dates and a friend had a printer. So I would, save as a PDF like the day before, ask my buddy to print it off, and then I go grab it from him and then take it into immigration. And then, of course, they're sitting there and they're like, is this in USD or Belizean dollars? 1 US is 2 Belizean. So I don't know. If I had $40,000, they were thinking that's Belizean. They're thinking it's 20,000 US. And I was like, no, it's US. And they're like, oh my God, 80,000 Belizean. That's ginormous for them, So, but it was the smallest account I could pull from, because I just didn't have an average balance, say in my checking, that was over, I don't know, 2,500, 3,000 threshold. I think they kind of change the numbers, but a lot of these countries are wanting to make sure that you have more than, say, 2,500 in an account, because they think that that's like a monthly amount that would be cover you in case of an extreme emergency. So you're not a financial burden on the country.
Yeah, that's intense, and you had to do all of that, and it freaks me out a little bit, because I'm like, I don't think I want to be giving bank statements to people I don't know, and then showing them how much money I have, and then what if they make you a target? But I have an anxiety disorder, so that's probably part of this.
But I black out all the account info, and I just circle the total. And again, honestly, you can Photoshop any of this stuff. You can totally fake it. Now, I'm not saying that that's what you should do, because this is legal information and yada, yada. But yeah. And I could just plan better. I could plan to, have a separate checking account that I just park $2,500 and let it sit there the whole entire time. But I haven't had to do that type of an activity anywhere else except for Belize. And maybe they've changed it. I don't know. I haven't been there in several years, so I don't know if they do it now. And even when I was in Thailand, they changed their length. I got 45 days on entry with a 30-day extension. They changed it. When I went back at another time, they only gave me 30 days on entry and then a 30-day extension if I wanted it. When I was in Vietnam, Vietnam was one where I had to apply for a visa in advance. You have to put all your information in. You have to pay a little fee, probably $10. And then you get an email PDF with an actual visa that you have to show, and then they stamp your passport. So that's something you have to do before you want to go. And you need to give yourself like a good week for that stuff, just in case anything weird happens. But when I was there, they were only giving out 30-day visas. And in the middle of my month, they changed it to 90-day visas. But I didn't qualify. You had to leave and then come back if you wanted. And I, already had other things planned. But these countries changed their length of stay for tourism visitors quite a lot more frequent than I think most people know. And when I first left the US, a lot of my friends were asking me about this because, everybody like pops down to Cancun, but you go for 1 week, 5-6 days, barely 7, and you have to go back to work. So nobody has ever thought about it. And they never even thought about the fact that they're getting a stamp in their passport when they enter, that is a permit, a visa. We can use these terms kind of interchangeably just about. So yeah, you cannot just go to a country and stay as long as you want. It does not work that way. And because I'm only 45, turning 45, I don't qualify for retirement visas because most of them you have to be 55. I think there's a few that are at 50. A retirement visa would typically give you like 1 year in a country. You have to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork. Again, you have to show proof of funds. They're really looking for a pension of some sort or Social Security as your retirement income. So even for me, that wouldn't work. I don't have a pension. My Social Security won't be taking that until a lot longer. So I don't know if I wanted to apply for any of these retirement visas. If I just show them all my accounts to see my net worth, will I qualify that way? Like, I don't plan to stay in any country for an entire year. There's too much to see, but maybe when I'm actually of their age qualification, I would potentially want to. Otherwise, leaving and coming back and kind of having that time reset, it works for me, except Europe is difficult with their moving calendar. It's a pain. It's tough to be out here. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work. And I hope our audience isn't like, oh, I never want to do this because it's all this work. Well, it's nothing that's amazing and fun is going to necessarily be easy. It's like, this is the work you have to put in to then spend time in these countries for long periods of time. And that's where the fun is. It's just a little bit of work up front to be able to stay for 3, 4, 7 months. So that's how I see it. But we are just mostly talking about the work in this episode. So it's, let's talk about what you did in Belize and like what you did in Vietnam. And then it makes it all worth it because I'm sure, those 2 countries are incredible. So it probably made the whole process worth it.
We have it so easy too. Our passport, there are so many countries we can just show up and they stamp us in. The majority of the world does not have that. So like Vietnam, I had to apply in advance. Indonesia, I did. Australia and New Zealand are a couple others. I remember I had, if it's not an actual visa you're applying for, they have this, an electronic form that like, it's not really a visa or a permit, but it's an acknowledgement that you're coming into the country and you have to fill out all your passport info and take a picture and pay a fee. It's always money. They want to know who's coming in advance. So there's different things to do, but we still have it so easy. We can travel to so many different countries and not have to do major paperwork. A lot of these other passport holders, especially from, say like Pakistan and Iran, and a friend of mine was telling me about his process in Belize, a Belizean, it was very difficult for him to get his passport. We take that for granted too. We just send in our information to our government, give them the money, whatever, $110, $120 for the passport, whatever it is these days, and we get it. That is not how it works in the majority of the world. They have to do background checks. My buddy in Belize was saying he couldn't even get a passport unless he had a sponsor in another country that wanted him to go there. And so that had to be a part of his process, not only did he have to have, some sponsor outside in a different country, but then he also had to have like a character reference sponsor in his country. I mean, it's like all these hoops. And then whatever the fee is for them, which is going to be hefty because their, currency is not worth as much, and their how much they earn is significantly less too. So we have it so easy. Our US passport is often referenced as a golden passport. European passports are generally pretty strong too, Australia, New Zealand. But the majority of the world, it is not easy for other people to get. So I definitely do not take it for granted. I understand how privileged I am just because I was physically birthed in the US, So yeah, it's definitely an area that, people that are not traveling long term and they get their first passport, they're not thinking about all these nuances that like nobody else has in the world. So it's really difficult for most people.
Yeah, and I'm never going to complain about having to redo or resubmit my passport, which is actually coming up. I have to renew it in 2025 because right now you can renew it online. It looks like they
Neat.
just allow. Yeah, they just. I just saw that headline somewhere, so I'm going to check that out. Do that 6 months beforehand, and
don't wait for that 6-month mark. That's another misconception.
Okay.
Do not wait until the 6-month mark. If you are not like, if you are within a year, so 12 to 6 months of it expiring and you're not going anywhere, just do it. Just get it done, especially with the state of the country right now this year. And
that's everything. A really, really good point.
Yeah, you want to get it into those offices because there's so many passport control offices around the US. You want to get it into the closest one and just get it back. You do not want to wait till the 6-month mark. That is the biggest misconception. The whole thing with that number is just some countries want you to have at least 6 months when you enter them valid on your passport, because if you're going to stay 3 to 6 months, they want you to be legal when you leave. Now, when you're going back to your home country, what happens if your passport is expired? Well, you're going to be let in, but you're going to get a slap on the hand, and it depends on which entry point, JFK, avoid, and Miami. Do not go back through Miami. I'll tell you that. I had a little issue there with my global entry once, and I got stuck in immigration office for 2 hours after coming home from Ecuador, and I have global entry. Some of these entry points are just wacky. But yeah, you just renew it. Do not wait till that last year because it's not like finishing your plate. You know what I mean? Like you got to eat everything off your plate to get the value of what you paid. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. Because if something happens and you want to leave the country, you want that passport to be valid and valid for a long time, whether it's vacation or a personal choice otherwise. Zombie apocalypse and you want to get out, you want that sucker to be valid so you can get in somewhere else. For me, on my passport, so I have the bigger book. I got my new passport in February of 2019. So technically 2029 would be when it expires. But because I'm getting so many stamps, it's just no way I'm going to last 10 years. However, I told myself when I have 6 full pages that are clean, that have no stamps on it, that's when I'm going to find my closest embassy or consulate, and I will initiate my renewal at that point. I do not want to get down to 1 or 2 pages left with me traveling around. So that is my personal rule. It has nothing to do with that 10-year mark. It's all about those pages. And I need empty pages to come in and out. So my personal rule of thumb is when I get down to only 6 clean full pages left, I'll make sure I'm in a country that has a solid embassy and consulate that can process a new one, and I'll just get it done wherever I am.
That's actually a really good point, because I didn't know that's how that worked. I thought they just gave you like it's a blue book or something. They just give you extra pages to like put stamps in, but it sounds like that's not the case.
I think it was 2016 or 2017, they stopped. You could in the past, so before that date, you could go into an embassy or consulate, or even in the US, you could go to whatever passport office, and they would sew in extra pages, and they stopped doing that back in 2016 or 2017. So you have to get a new passport book, like a full one. And then, of course, I want the bigger one. And I know some places abroad some offices won't give the bigger book. They'll only give like an emergency one, and they're going to, which is really small. It only has a couple, pages in it, because it's the whole thing of like, get you back home and then you handle it there. But again, because I want to keep my tax exclusion and I want to stay out of the US more than 330 days in a year, I do not want to go back to the US to renew my passport. Because if it takes longer than 35 days, that screws me out of that tax exclusion that I still want to keep, I think. So for me, I know I will renew abroad, and I will make sure I'm in a country, in a city that has an office that can do the full shebang with it. So when it gets closer to that, that's how I will start planning my travels, will be around, where am I going to renew my passport? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with that we might have not talked about yet, about either the tax exclusion or making sure you're not an illegal immigrant in another country? Anything else?
I think these are two really important topics, and there's lots of nuances to them. And, we barely touched the surface. But I hope that if anyone is interested in doing longer term travel, that at least they have some topics to start researching for themselves, and they can find the professionals that can give them all the little details and nuances, and to understand that just because we're talking about this today, it can all be different tomorrow. Things change. And especially with the visa links, I've personally experienced that myself several times. But it's good to know that happens. So just because you've been somewhere before doesn't mean it's going to be the same when you go back again. So I think those are a couple important tidbits to keep in mind. And yes, it sounds complicated. But again, like you said, after you do the legwork on all of this, it's easy going now. Even though I go to new countries all the time, like funny thing about Albania, so it's out of the Schengen zone, and that's why I'm here. But I can stay here for 12 months. They give US passport holders a 12-month period to be here as a tourist. So that's cool. I'm not going to stay that long. I have other places I want to get to, but that was a relief. So if you're the type of person that kind of wanted to like go somewhere and you didn't have to apply for stuff, this is a good place to sit. The only caveat I don't think we didn't talk about at all, as a tourist or a visitor, you're not allowed to work. So this whole digital nomad thing, like I said, I'm technically retired, so I'm not online working, and doing this with you, I'm not getting paid for it. So it's just, something fun. So it's not work, right? But before I was running my business, and it's a gray line. My business was in the US. My clients were in the US. Where I sit with my computer is not necessarily where the physical work is happening, because it's digital. It's not like being a bartender or a store clerk or something like that, where you're physically doing it. Now, if I came here and I had clients and I was conducting meetings or business or something, that's obviously working in a country, and you're not supposed to work as a tourist or visitor. So that's the gray area as a digital nomad, and everyone kind of sitting at these cafes or co-working, entering as a tourist. There are digital nomad visas out there. The only people that are really getting them are the people that do want to stay longer. Otherwise, other nomads like me, we come in for, a month, a couple weeks, 2 months, and then we leave and we head off to the next place. So we're flying under the radar the best we can, because it's not like they have thousands of immigration officers knocking on doors. Are you working from home? what's your status? So, but they could ask you when you're at the immigration stand getting ready, to leave to the next place or enter. They normally ask you questions when you're entering. What are you doing here? What is your purpose? How long are you staying? And you just want to pretend you're a tourist, is what the golden rule is as a digital nomad. So we're here to learn and explore about your beautiful country. I don't go places to work or for work. I don't say that part out loud, but I say the first part out loud.
That's interesting because I have had a couple of people who are like, oh, I love that my job is remote because now I can just go work from a different country if I want to. And I'm like, actually, I don't think you can, at least not long term, because it's also your work will probably not allow that either.
But it's the language though. So when you say it like that, they're thinking, I'm taking my physical computer. I'm going over here to sit. I am working. And no, digital work does not, where your butt is not necessarily where your work is. That's the thing. In-person work is work. Now, if you're on your computer, I'm here in Albania. If I'm on my computer here and I found Albanian clients and I was doing projects for Albanian clients in this country, then I'm working in the country. Otherwise, if I keep it all out and it all stays in the US, I legally can work in the US. I'm a US citizen. I have legal rights to work in the United States. So I keep all of my clients US clients. So that's how I got around it. Now, it is a gray area. Some countries, their immigration laws will accept that. Some don't. A lot of times they're not digging around for it. They are going to go after the nomads that are trying to go and do in-person work. So they're not working online. They want to come to the country. They want to stay at the hostel for free by cleaning and cooking in the hostel. That is working. When you are, even if you're not getting cash paid, but you're staying somewhere for free with exchange of your personal services. So there's these work-away programs, even the house sitting. House sitting is illegal because it is deemed as work in every single country in the world, because you are staying somewhere for free and you are watching the property, you're taking care of plants, dogs, cats, horses, whatever it is. You are a house manager. That is deemed as work. So is volunteer when you look into that as well. So yeah, there's just so many, but everyone just writes it off. They're like, I'm getting a free place to stay because I'm house sitting all around the world and I'm so excited about it. And they're doing these YouTube videos and they're putting it out there on all these different ways. And I'm like, you are literally saying, hey, I'm illegally working in your country. And I have house sat in the past, but I learned quickly that it is illegal because I've read up on this for many, many countries. And so I stopped. And if I do it again, I'll only do it for legit family and friends, because that is the easiest way to kind of do it legally in these other countries. Because, you can go and stay with your family, and whatever, and friends and this and that. But yeah, so many nomads and expats do not understand that house sitting and work away is 100% illegal unless you have a work visa. And no one is getting these work visas for that, because the government wouldn't give it to them, because you're taking a job away from a local citizen. So you wouldn't qualify. Yeah.
What about those, like, what is it? The wolf, like the farmer, you know what I'm talking about? Is that, so that's technically illegal, even though it's like a big organization? Do they not do like visas or something? I know nothing about it.
They don't. Most of them don't. Yeah, most of them do not. They put it up on, so that's the whole other thing. You've got literally the website, I think it's called workaway.com or whatever, these programs. And yeah, I mean, it's just flat out illegal. So it's trusted house sitters. But the thing is this: if you did work away or house sitting in your country where you're allowed to work, then it's legal. but that's not how everyone's using these programs. Some people are, I do have a lot of nomad friends. They go back to the US. It's really expensive compared to the rest of the world. So they do the house sitting and whatnot. So that is legal because they're allowed to work in the US. US citizens can work in the US. You could do a workaway. So get a free lodging and meals and you work on a farm. I met some lovely people in Australia. This one gal from Italy, she was working on a potato farm somewhere in Australia, but she had a legit work visa. That's the other thing, but a lot of nomads they don't get the work visa because they do not know about it and they do not understand what they're doing is illegal. So I have not met anyone who has been deported. They've been found out by an immigration somehow for the house sitting or workaway, and they've been deported or sent off to wherever they were going next. I haven't met anyone personally, so doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. But technically, according to these government sites, because I went to several countries' government websites because I was curious about this. And I dug into it. And yeah, it clearly states work does not have to mean you get paid with currency. It's an exchange for a service. So free room and board for you doing something means that that's work. There was a caveat I read, say you volunteer at a marathon race or something like that. You know how they normally give you t-shirts that says staff or something? Wear it, but then give it back. Don't keep anything. When you are gifted something, that's work. So that volunteerism then turned into work. So as long as you give everything back or just don't accept it from the get-go, that is one way to beat around the bush, from what I read. So it's wild.
Yeah, that is wild. It makes me think of things like how does mission work? And then how does the Peace Corps work? And I actually know a woman who was in the Peace Corps for several years who I'm about to interview on the podcast in a few weeks. So I might ask her about that. I wonder if that's different because it's religious organization for one. Peace Corps is not, but missionary work is.
But so there's certain things that fall under education that you can do. So, and I know this because I spoke at conferences all over the place, all over the US, which obviously didn't matter because US citizen, but I spoke in Canada and in Dubai and Qatar. And in Canada and Dubai, I did not need a work visa because I was speaking at a conference. They literally had a line that said, as a tourist or visitor, these are the things you can do. These are the things you cannot do. And because I was speaking, or even it was just attending a conference, a professional conference of some sort. I was in education, but it was a professional conference. Then I could do that as a tourist, as a visitor. When I went to Qatar, though, that particular country, I had to fill out a visa on arrival. So flew over there, filled out a little form. I had to pay, I think it was $30, just because of how that worked. And to be honest, I cannot remember if it was really a work visa or maybe it was just a visitor visa, but that was the one place I've been where I had to pay at entry, and I haven't had to do that anywhere else. So I can't remember if that was work related or not, but I did go there to speak at a school. So I'm wondering with the missionary and Peace Corps, if that also kind of falls under that caveat, or they could have their own thing that they have to do. I just had some friends, they just were over in Africa. There's a program called Crutches for Africa. It's organized by Rotary International. They get a whole bunch of mobility aids. They go over, they help and do all of this stuff. And I had a friend go and kind of was a chaperone leader kind of a thing. And I know for a fact, they did not get a work visa for that. I'm guessing it was just all under tourism and whatnot. They were helping out. They went into the schools, they painted rooms and picked up trash and taught some math and English and, and this and that. So they were providing various services too, and helping out on top of providing the mobility, the wheelchairs and crutches and other devices and stuff, the gifts. So, but I do think a lot of people probably do things like that illegally because they just don't know any better.
Yeah, that's really true. I just Googled, like, do you have to have a work visa to be in the Peace Corps? But it's saying, like, to be in the Peace Corps as long as you're a US citizen or national. But that's talking about, like,
Being a member
of the United States. Yeah, being a member, not traveling with them. So that's probably something that would require more Google rabbit holes. So I entreat everybody in the audience to do that if you want to.
Yeah.
Although I feel like the Peace Corps is a huge organization, so I'm sure they've got it figured out. Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here with us, Christina. I know I said we were coming to the end of the episode like 30 minutes ago, but these topics are just so easy to get caught up in and talk about because it's so interesting and so nuanced, and it's something that, you know, not all of us do. Barely any of us do. I mean, I only travel, maybe the longest has been 3 weeks at a time. So in a foreign country, I mean. And so it's really good to know the other side of this. And yeah, I really thank you for that. So thanks for being here.
Yeah.